na pula na mamo na kupu na o Hawaii. Mai ka mole o haloa. E nona e ke aloha. E ka haa, e ka haa heo pu. I ko kako aina, i ko kako kuliana, i ko kako aloha. O ke kahi i ke kahi. Nona aina like ole. Nona wahi kapu i anei. Mai ka piko a mauna kea, a hiki ki kai ho honu o ka noa. No laila, e no mako na kiai, na kupu ho, ka hanau na ho, e hiki mai. E kupaa, e kuha heo, e kuviva ole, i ko kako aina. E kuviva ole, no ko kako la hui aloha. No laila, e wahi leo loa ia hoko paka ia pau, no ke ia kono ana mai ia mako. Na hamana, a me na kumu o halau kumana. Mama kiki aku, e kula, ho a mana. All everybody for coming today and inviting our school Halau Kumana to participate in this very important event in our community. We're here to offer oli, the traditional way that we engage with our aina. As Kanaka, it is important for us to be here to share with you who we are. To share with you the love that we have for our land that is being expressed throughout the world. Like everybody can see at Mauna Kea. Here we are in the same spirit, with the same aloha, with the same passion, with the new generation of leaders. We are very happy to sit and to engage, to listen and to learn with all of you here tonight. As we do and we pursue what is best for our communities, what is best for our keiki, and what is best for Hawaii. Nolela, aloha kako.
A huge thanks to Halau Kumana for our opening oli, for our evening together. It sets a tone of respectfulness and thoughtfulness and aloha that we will carry throughout this time together. Tonight's focus will not be about complaints, rancor, division, or not being heard on these plans, but instead will be an uplifting and inspirational time as we look forward to creating a different vision that incorporates local voices and forward-thinking ideas. We welcome as guests the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers staff and those involved in this project to see new ideas and hear alternatives that may not have been considered, and we thank them for coming tonight. This opening oli also reminds us that we are only caretakers and stewards of this land, and we must speak for the land as well as the people as we share our thoughts today. The natural and scenic beauty of the land needs to have as holistic and advanced methods of flood mitigation and care that incorporate eco-friendly solutions that work with nature as much as possible. Tonight, our format will be of quite short presentations, about 5 minutes each, on a wide variety of topics related to this proposed project, and will provide a chance to talk story with a variety of exhibitors and speakers. Crucially, this process is also a chance for you to engage your thoughts and ideas with these same speakers and exhibitors, and we also have post-it notes at several locations to write your thoughts. We also have a Mentimeter, if you see the screen on the right, if you wish to text your questions for answering later. But given time constraints tonight, we will not be taking individual questions or comments to speakers on the stage, and this is not also a debate format. If you wish to speak with people after they speak, you're more than welcome to meet with them at the various tables in the back where they each have a booth. Tonight's event follows on the heels of Oceanit's study of the project thus far, which was hired by the Permitted Interaction Group of the Honolulu City Council on this topic. They shared their findings where they came to the conclusion that the community did not feel listened to nor respected in this process, and that the need to engage the community deeply as a shared process in any decisions is needed moving forward as new alternatives are considered. Our friends at Oceanit are also in attendance tonight, and we thank them for being here. Tonight's program is also being recorded by Olelo, and we offer our sincere thanks to them and to the Parks Department and staff for use of this clubhouse ballroom. We'd also like to thank all those who've come together tonight and to put this event on, especially the dedicated volunteer board to protect our Ala Wai Watersheds. I see several area representatives of our Ahupua'a are here, including some state representatives. I see Dale Kobayashi, our city council members Kimberly Pine and Kobayashi, Carol Fukunaga and Tommy Waters are here, as well as numerous neighborhood board members. In the interest of time, I would like to just acknowledge our council members and thank them for being here. We're now going to begin our presentations, which will be about 5 minutes each. Feel free to walk around the tables and talk with those good folks at any time. At this time, I'd like to ask up our friends from Halau Kumana for any other words they'd like to say.
E nā hoa maka maka, mai ka moku puni nui o ke ave a hiki ini iha o ka helelani ano ai ke aloha kako. Aloha everybody. My name is Imaikalani Winchester. I'm here on behalf of Halau Kumana New Century Public Charter School, which, as some of you in the room know, are one of the few vestiges of Aloha Aina schools that practice traditional sciences, practice traditional knowledge, both mind, body, and spirit. We are located in Makiki, where one of the detention basins are located, or at least proposed to be located. There seems to be some gray area right now, but we're here assuming that we are still being targeted for this project. Just a little bit about Halau Kumana and Makiki. For some of us who actually been in that stream knows that it was full of rubbish. It was a community dump for many, many years until Halau Kumana about 10 years ago showed up. And we turned a community dump into Aina. And Aina is something that's very important for us to consider as we go about our daily life. Aina, that which feeds, that which gives us life, both mind, body, and spirit. So we're here on behalf of Halau Kumana, and we're very concerned about the proposed project that could potentially impact our capacity to continue our cultural exercise, our Kanaka sciences, and to potentially interfere with our watershed management. So today, we brought a couple of students here dressed in red. Wave to them, students. They're not getting extra credit for this. They just get mana. Today we brought a bunch of students here that are ready, eager, and willing to talk story. They've been at our school for several years. They've been in those streams. They have pulled out that rubbish together. We also have Kumu Trevor Atkins, who's also here with us, who has been the leader of the annual Makiki Stream Cleanup, which has unified over 18 different organizations, maybe more, stretching across all three valleys that we're talking about today. So we have quite a bit of information, anecdotes to share for those of you guys who want to talk story with the youth over at Halau Kumana. I'm going to leave you guys with this because I know there's a lot of people that's coming up today to share. And I want everybody to say it with me right now. Ready? Aloha Aina. Say it loud. Aloha Aina. One more time. Aloha Aina. Now, Aloha Aina, you may have heard, been used by Kanaka Maoli. And it's been a word that was recently brought to life to really establish our relationship to land. Can everybody say, Malama Aina? Nice and loud, Malama Aina. And Malama Aina, as we know, is to take care of the land, take care that which takes care of us, which is why we need to walk very delicately. We need to be very aware of where we're going as a community. And Aloha Aina is our Kanaka science. Do not be fooled by the telescope narrative that Hawaiians did not have science. Ole, you think we just drifted here? Back and forth over centuries? We just drifted back and forth? Ole, we're the best navigators in the world. Yes, I said it, the best navigators in the world. We're the best watershed engineers in the world. Our loi, our fish ponds, are examples of those. Raise your hand if you've been in Manoa. Now Manoa, Hiko, just a few hundred years ago, maybe 150 years ago, was once covered in loi. You know what's very good for protecting the watershed from floods. Lo'is, permeable systems. Okay? This is not us trying to go back to the past. This is using traditional knowledge to guide us into the future. If our kupuna could do it, so can we. If our kupuna had the knowledge, the insight, the willingness, the hard work, the fortitude to do it, so can we. Which is why we are here. Which is why I'm using all 5 of my minutes to make sure that Aloha Aina is the message that we need to send. We need to put people into the streams. We need to put children into the streams. They need to see, they need to know, they need to feel what it's like to be a part of Aina, that which feeds, that which gives life, mind, body, and spirit. And this is the therapy, the therapy that we need, not just as Kanaka, but as a people here in Hawaii. Again, my message is to invest in traditional sciences, build more lo'i, build more fish ponds. You want to protect our watersheds? Then do what our kupuna did. My name is Imai Kalani Winchester. I'm here representing Halau Kumana New Century Public Charter School. Thank you for your time. Please come and check us out if you have any questions. Mahalo, ahuho.
So for Nawai Kolu, it consists of 3 streams, Makiki, Manoa, and Pololo streams, where we study our stream animals here. So we have different types of native animals that are in our streams. We have O'opu Alamo'o, O'opu no Pili, O'opu na Kea, O'opu na Niha, and O'opu Okupa. So there are 5 O'opu that live in our streams in different areas. So we have 2 crustaceans, and we have 2 mollusks that live in our stream, the Hi'iwai and the Hapabai, and Opai Oeha'a and Opai Kalaole, which is hidden for some reason. So the thing that's very interesting about them is they have this ability to climb, which is really cool because they come from the ocean as babies. So they can go way high into the mountains, all the way through lower areas, even the Ala Wai Canal and our watershed, all the way up into the back of Manoa, as well as Makiki and Palolo valleys. So if you can see them, they are outside of the water. They go around waterfalls and obstacles. But these animals have adaptations on the bottom of their bodies, which are called suction cups, and then it's a modified fin that allows them to climb. So if you can imagine, there's a lot of barriers to migration of this animal from the ocean, but you might think, well, I wonder what side it might choose by coming back to a watershed. So if you look at this side, you would see that there's not a lot of disturbance of people, but when we look underwater in streams like that don't have a lot of disturbance, we can see a lot of o'opu that are there. So when we start changing that kind of habitat to becoming like this, we can imagine how our migration of our animals are impacted. So we actually use these animals as indicators of health and connection to the ocean. And what we have there in replacement of this was a video of about 1,000 catfish that have now taken over a lot of our urban streams. So what we're finding in streams that have now displaced our native animals that we use as indicators of health are now these invasive species. We have every animal on the left is being outcompeted by something that has been introduced by aquarium species or pets that are unwanted by people on the right. All right, so there's supposed to be an animation of how it changes from being very natural to being very urban watersheds, and we can see that what we're doing with students here is that we are going into the streams and we're trying to remove our invasives and make room for our natives. So it's very interesting when we go out there to see if we can see recovery in our native species. Next slide, please. So we have about 20 study sites through Makiki, Manoa, and Pololo, and if we can go to the next slide. Well, we're working with about 50 schools in the Waiakolu, in Makiki, Manoa, and Pololo, and students as young as kindergarten in really shallow water. And with more older students, we can see that the amounts of natives we capture per time we go out, about 50 surveys per year in 2017, 2018, and 2019. The amount of natives that we're collecting is going up in our sites when averaged across all sites, as well as the amount of invasives is going down. So we are having an impact with all of the students' hands that are going out there. So we're starting to see more natives just out in the stream today. We're almost at 50% native in the site that we worked at today, which is really cool. So this is our oldest site that we've been working at over time at Kaimiki High School. Our first year we can see we had maybe single-digit percentage of natives, but we can see the amount of native, the percent of natives captured has now gone to being mostly natives in our oldest sites that we've been monitoring for the longest. So this doesn't happen, again, without all the organizations that have been coming together. It's not only schools and students and the people in this room, it's a lot of professional organizations that have come to recognize that it's going to take a lot of hands in our community to come together to start restoring our streams and using our indicators, our opu and our other native animals as health indicators to restore our watershed, and seeing the migration still happen to this day. And thank you for your time. Mahalo.
So Hawaii Sea Grant, we're a non-advocacy organization. We don't have a position on the Ala Wai projects. I'm just here to share some of the latest science, and I look forward to talking more about it with you in the back of the room. I have a display up in the back. So sea level is rising around Oahu and Hawaii. This is a plot of the sea level trend from the tide gauge at Honolulu Harbor. You can see here in the picture. And we're starting to see some of the impacts of that around, oh, I don't know what happened to my pictures there. Around Waikiki and the Ala Wai. We're seeing flooding coming over, particularly over the Mauka Wall of the Ala Wai during these king tide events we're having. Coming up through the storm drains. That's a storm drain on the Makai side of the Ala Wai. And we're also seeing increasing wave overwash and erosion at our beaches at Waikiki and elsewhere. These are impacts we expect to see coming more and more often in the coming decades and into the latter part of this century. Okay, so sea levels are rising around Hawaii. It's also rising globally, and we're starting to see some of that locally here as well. This is a plot of the long-term global mean sea level trend. The plot in blue is from tide gauges taken from all over the global oceans and averaged together. The marks in red there are the more recent satellite altimetry data. This is data from a satellite that goes around and scans the ocean regularly. What we see from this, from the early 1900s up to the present, is that the global mean sea level is accelerating, roughly doubling from the early century, the middle part of the century, and doubling again or more up into recent decades. And we do expect this trend of acceleration to continue into the future. So next slide, please. So what does this mean for the future? This is one set of projections, a recent study from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in 2017. They provide a range of scenarios. Low-end scenario is as little as 1 feet. We can kind of discount that one because we do expect rates to accelerate. That would be if the rate does just continue out linearly. And then an extreme rate at the higher end is as much as 8.5 feet by the end of the century, which is a low probability scenario, but it is physically plausible if we really continue to dump greenhouse gas emissions into our atmosphere, CO2, methane, and if the ice sheet forecasts turn out to be the worst case scenario. The one forecast we really kind of zero in on is the intermediate scenario, that light blue scenario, which points to about a meter, about 3 feet of sea level rise. And the state and the counties are really focusing on that cloudy scenario. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. Sea level at the local scale here in Oahu at Waikiki doesn't really follow those smooth curves as you've seen in those projections. It acts a lot more like what we've seen in the tide gauge record, with a lot of peaks and valleys and everything like that. And so what we're going to see more and more is these king tides, these high tide flooding events happening over the next decade or two, as we catch up to the kind of those long-term, more chronic sea level rise flooding. So that's really what sea level rise looks like for the next few decades, is these more frequent, more severe, extreme high tide events coming over the Ala Wai walls, coming over Waikiki Beach, eroding our beaches. So in response to that, the state of Hawaii, state legislature, had 2 state climate initiatives that they passed in 2014 and 2017, which directed the development of the state sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report, as well as a Hawaii sea level rise viewer. It's an online mapping tool that was developed to go along with the state report, where I'll have that set up in the back of the room. Folks can come back there, talk about it, we can explore it. zoom in around Waikiki or Ala Wai, or if there's other areas you want to look at, we can explore that. So my take-home message is whatever options are discussed, considered, ultimately settled on for the Ala Wai. Sea level rise needs to be a major consideration for the bottom of the watershed. It's going to increase the flooding, reduce the ability for the watershed to drain out of the Ala Wai, as well as our drainage infrastructure, Macaulay, Waikiki, Ala Wai. So we need to be taking it seriously, and I applaud the state and county government for beginning to do that. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'm really pleased that you all are here to attend this great seminar on fixing the Ala Wai. And obviously, the most important thing is that it's a community effort. So I brought a slideshow that actually goes back and connects with the Polynesian Voyaging Society and the Malama Honua Worldwide Voyage. And from that voyage, we had a mission to go around the world, circumnavigate the world, and learn from different entities and different indigenous knowledge that exist, that actually has existed throughout the ages, because they have a good relationship with nature, and they know how to handle sustainability. So as we're going through this, one of the first things I did was make a promise to the children. So Nainoa and Bruce and the whole crew down there said, when you come back, make sure you bring back the knowledge and share that knowledge. And while we're on our trip, make sure we make an effort to share the knowledge of the indigenous people of Hawaii. So the culture here in Hawaii has a real tight affiliation with nature. And we want that to be definitely applied to the restoration of the Ala Wai project. So as you see my slide presentation, this I give to the children and also to different members of the community, different groups. But we have a really neat opportunity here to restore and revitalize the Ala Wai. So throughout the slides, you'll see sort of the history, but Hawaii, at one time, the Ala Wai, this basin right here, was actually the breadbasket of Oahu. There was rice grown here, and it was a really productive and really regarded as a place where the ali'i would come down and engage in the water. And water is, at that time, and it still is, and it should be considered a very valuable commodity. It was a sign of wealth if you took care of your water. So what we want to do, and I think it's probably the most logical thing and a win-win situation, is to apply that indigenous knowledge, which has been here and has supported the Hawaiian people here for hundreds of years, if not thousands, by developing and integrating an ahupua'a system into the restoration of the Ala Wai. So as you see this ahupua'a system, the Waikiki ahupua'a, it goes way up into Manoa Valley, and there's all these streams that feed into it. Those streams are a very important part of actually the end game, which is down here at the Ala Wai. And the Ala Wai has been made into a canal, and for different reasons. At one time, they suggested that it was a health hazard, but that was actually never proven. They had been living here and sustaining their life here for a long time. What we have to be aware of is they had people that the Ko'okuleana is a person who was actually in charge of taking care of that whole stream and integrating the community all up and down the stream. So what we want to do, which I would love to suggest that we do, is we integrate the community all the way from the top of the mountains down to the bottom of the ocean. And what's really unique about the Ala Wai is that it's all along, most of it is government or school land that we can have communities and schools engage in and protecting the water and cuckooing the water and taking care of it. You can see that Waikiki is our engine. I know we want to all work together. I really hope the hotels get behind this, because we can make this into a large, long Apua'o Park along the Ala Wai, all the way from the University of Manoa, all the way down to the outlet here at the Ala Wai. And if we did that, then that particular cultural significance of the ahupua'a system would be integrated into the park, and we'd have a win-win situation where visitors and the local community could engage in the historical water system, the Ala Wai system. This slide just shows what they're going to do as far as dredging, and it has become a very, very unfortunate, very, very sad situation because it keeps filling with sediment. Now, how do we relieve that sediment and not let it build up? What you would want to do is put another sort of another entry point at this end of the Ala Wai that brought in deep water. We don't open this end because that might backtrack into Waikiki Beach, but you could put some water systems where the circulation would be constantly flowing and moving that sediment out onto the reefs. Now, the thing, we don't want it to just dump onto the reef one time, so a slow flow of water out of this end of the Ala Wai would actually enhance the water quality at this dead end, and it would also take the sediment onto the reef at a minimal pace that could also not hurt the reefs as much. Now, these things are not new. If you look at this bottom picture in the corner, in Seoul, Korea, they've actually restored a freeway with a new water system that has become a huge attraction. Again, on the win-win situation, we will need to capture some of that corner part of that Ala Wai golf course, and that pink part and the drawn highlighted part right here is actually open land that you could adjust the course so you don't take any of the golfing courses away, but you could add this line and an access area down in the corner where you could build a lo'i and sort of rice paddies, and eventually maybe even eat those. But the main thing is to get community stewardship, get people involved. That is happening, thank goodness. It's still an inspiration for all the children to learn. And what you would also have to do is have an access road. If you follow the white line, it goes all the way from the end here, all the way up to the University of Hawaii. In that regard, we'd have access to that for the community. You'd have a buffer zone and a flood mediation thing. And you'd also have a way for students getting from the top of UH all the way down to the beach safely without going through Kapahulu. I know I had a lot more to share, but at this time, I've been told that I'm going to move along. If you would like some more questions and see the whole slideshow, I am back there at the PVS, Biology and Voyaging Society table, so please come. And again, thank you all for being here. Remember, we all stand on the shoulders of our kapunas, and also we all have to understand that it's the grace of the Hawaiian people and their culture that we all share this aloha spirit. So we need to actually honor that and respect that and apply it to our solutions for the better Hawaii. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me here. I'm a Manoa resident, and I'm also working at UH. I'm in the Natural Resource and Environmental Management Department. So I study stream, watershed, and how any kind of impairment or climate change could potentially impact our watershed. Specifically, I want to advocate that stream is our integral linkage to connect our upland all the way to the coast. And in order to better understand our stream, so here is an illustration of the watershed. There are a lot of things going on this watershed, and specifically water coming down, water going back up as evaporation. I always tell my students that you can consider the watershed like your bathtub. That the water coming down, like the bathtub is holding the water, and at the same time, there are different usage of the water being taken out the bathtub. But at the same time, at the end of it, all the water will drain it right out of the bathtub, and that's where our stream is. So by monitoring our stream, we will better understand what's going on with the entire watershed. And what's even better, if we monitor throughout the stream reach, we will be able to understand what's going on at certain place of the watershed. Okay, so you will be able to understand where are the source or where are the different kind of sediment or nutrient or pollution that is coming from. So by understand or monitoring our watershed or our stream, it will help us better understand the watershed. So again, I just want to reiterate that stream is so important linkage to help us understand from the upland all the way to the coast. And specifically right now that we have a different set of monitoring going on, here is an example that we are monitoring our stream at the upland at the Lion Arboretum. So if you ever visit the Lion Arboretum, if you go down to by the stream side, you will see some instrument. That's our instrument. And on the other hand, we also have some of the weather stations that if you ride at the Lion Arboretum, that by the parking lot you'll see a shining tower. That's our weather station that is recording our weather from rainfall, humidity, temperature, real time every 15 minutes. So here is an illustration about all the currently or previous monitoring effort has been done by the agency or by the state. But what's even better is that UH recently funded an effort to look at all the watershed by their water quality and their stream, their storm, or and even throughout the canal. So they are doing like monthly sampling to understand what's the water quality, and it's throughout the watershed, the whole three, Makiki, Manoa, and Pololo Reach. So here is the effort that we are showing. There's a website about the small Ala Wai project. We also have a table in the behind this end of it. So please do feel free to come talk to us if you want to learn more about what's going on, that what we have learned about monitoring the stream. And we also have other UH faculty that has been doing actively understand what's the source of a nutrient or even some pharmaceutical a tracer to understand what's going on in the stream. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
What an amazing event. I want to say thank you to Sydney and all the many hands that went into making this event so successful. Thank you all for being here on this busy holiday week time. But we're going to talk today about a concept of using oysters to improve water quality and clarity. So we're part of a Waterkeeper Alliance. Waterkeeper has over 340 waterkeepers. They are situated next to a water body, frequently like the sound keepers of the Seattle area, San Francisco Baykeeper, New Jersey, New York Baykeeper. We are Oahu Waterkeeper and Waterkeeper Hawaiian Islands, protecting collectively 2.5 million square miles of rivers, lakes, and shorelines around the world. So we're very grateful to be the first Waterkeeper program here in the Hawaiian Islands. So our mission is to protect present generations' ability to fish, swim, drink, and otherwise utilize and enjoy our water resources. Otherwise utilize and enjoy is actually speaks to the fact that cultural resources, cultural uses of water don't get spoken to in that fish, swim, and drink. But it's important to have clean water in its natural course for many reasons. So our partnerships are to implement projects that mitigate the impacts of stormwater and wastewater, particularly in urban communities. Next slide. And so one of the things that other waterkeepers have done in other places around the world that's been very successful is to use oysters to filter and improve water quality. This has been done extensively on the East Coast. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. But here in Hawaii, we are partnering with UH at the Pacific Aquaculture and Coastal Resources Center at UH Hilo. We have partnerships with the U.S. Navy at Pearl Harbor, with Marine Corps base at Kaneohe. Here, the two yacht clubs that sit on the two sides of the Ala Wai Canal in the harbor as it exits out into our beautiful Pacific Ocean. We have oyster cages on either side of that canal, and we are in the pilot process of monitoring those oysters and seeing their growth and survival rates. I can tell you that anecdotally, it's harder for the oysters to live and breathe in the Ala Wai Canal. It's very sedimented. A lot of what we learned through doing this is the realities of our water quality conditions, and the oysters are telling us a lot every day about what's going on in the water. Next slide. So oysters filter water, and in the process they remove harmful pollutants, including sediment, bacteria, heavy metals, PCBs, oil, microplastics, and carbon. Next slide, please. And so one place, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation actually did a study where they didn't change anything. They didn't do any infrastructure, they didn't stop stormwater, they didn't change wastewater practices, they just put a lot of oysters in the Lafayette River. And under the EPA standards for measuring water quality, there was too much bacteria in the water for them to be swimmable waters. After the oyster project, the waters are swimmable, and people are allowed to use that river for recreational purposes. We, I think, have obvious reasons why we need to maintain swimmable waters, I think for our economy, but also for our people who live here every day. I mean, I think about my own family with very young generations coming, and we don't want to put them in the water if we're not confident about what's going on. So the oysters are a really great way to attract attention to the things that are happening in the water. Next slide, please. So the Billion Oyster Project in New York Harbor is one of the more successful projects, not only for its restoration, but also for its public education. Next slide. They've already restored 39 million oysters. Actually, all students. Students grow the oysters, put them in the cages, put the cages down in the water. This is something that has galvanized a very urban community. People in New York don't go to their ocean. They can't even stick their toe in the ocean. It's so dirty. They don't go swimming. And so if you can inspire this kind of engagement and excitement about things that are going on in the water, for sure we can do that here in Hawaii, where our kids really love the ocean. Next slide, please. So Dr. Maria Haas at UH Hilo is the first person to do this in the state of Hawaii. She's been able to propagate 2 species of native oyster. The smaller native oyster that we have on our table here today, we have some live oyster babies on our table. These are the ones that are from the Ala Wai Canal. They've come to join us tonight. But we also are propagating right now pearl oysters, which are much larger. They can grow up to this big. A lot of people think Tahitian pearl. In fact, Pearl Harbor is named after the same pearl species. It's exactly the same. And they filter large amounts of water. Next slide, please. So they are in production here at the University of Hawaii in Hilo. Next slide, please. So Ala Wai Harbor, we all know that we really need a lot of aloha for the Ala Wai and the area where it's exiting into our ocean water, and we want to raise awareness about that. Next slide, please. And so we have our cages in the Ala Wai Harbor. The cages are to protect the oysters from predators. Really, the predators that I'm more worried about are human, but the ones that, in fact, the cages are designed to protect them from is mostly crabs, some fish, birds, but really humans should not be tampering with the cages. The cages really are essential part of the project during the pilot phase. We're looking at different implementations of using oyster reefs, more like a natural system. But for now, it's really a safety issue. In fact, oysters in this environment cannot be eaten, not by anybody, not anytime. These are restoration oysters. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why we love the native oyster so much, because as a much smaller oyster, it's not going to get to the food oyster size that we frequently see the Pacific oyster. We have Pacific oysters on our table as examples as well. So just to wrap it up, we have an environmental education program where we're teaching children about plants and animals that can be used for bioremediation. Oysters is just one of them. There's sea cucumbers, limu. All these things take nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water. So really it's putting things back to where they came from. PVS is a very strong partner in these efforts. We just put native oysters at their facility at Sand Island this past week. And this is where I want to stop actually on this slide. We need to remember that fish are very affected by the things that happen to our waters. And in fact, we're the ones doing these things to our waters. The oysters are our motivator to change what we're doing, but it's not just oysters we have to worry about eating. We have to worry about the contaminants that are in the water and very vulnerable communities that are fishing out of these waters, and that's part of the education that we wanted to bring here today. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but I'm available to give presentations to schools or groups if you'd like to learn more about this project, and we invite you to come over to our table. Thank you so much for being here.
My name is Lauren Roth-Benu. I am the founder and CEO of 3R Water and inventor of this amazing mobile app called Follow the Drop. Our team is basically folks that have over 20 years experience both in the water sector and software development space. And we came together to develop technological tools to build water security and resiliency. So my personal interest in sustainable water management began over 25 years ago when I attended the University of Colorado, and it was there that I was exposed to the science and the magnitude of our water footprint on this planet, and especially on the effects of both people and planet. So over the last 2 decades, I've served as a designer, both in integrated water resource management and green infrastructure, and have focused all my effort in development, because how we choose to development greatly affects our water security and resiliency. So I'm giving you a map up here. This is just outside the city of Houston, but it could really be outside any city across the United States or even here in Honolulu. Over 30 years ago, you can see in the green, we have the ecological systems here represented as wetlands and prairies. And in the gray and purple represents development, impervious areas from houses, roads, parking lots, etc. In just the course of 30 years, 70% of these ecological systems have been removed and replaced with more impervious area. These very ecological systems act as the sponges and filters for managing stormwater. So when you replace them, guess what happens? We end up with the conditions that we're seeing today, issues of flooding, issues of pollution, and also a lot of people don't think about this, but it's also damaging potential future water supply, because when you have impervious area, you cannot get water back into the ground. So this is not just a Hawaii issue or an America issue. This is across the globe. Over 21 million people annually are affected by flooding, which costs over $6 billion in the United States alone. Stormwater runoff, guess what, is also the leading cause of pollution in our waterways. So that's heavy metals, that's nutrients, that's plastics. And here in Hawaii, ultimately gets into our oceans, which equates to overgrowth of algae on reefs, to diseased turtles, if you aren't aware of that. And also just overall disrupts the food web. So of course with climate change, we're gonna see all these effects compounded. And so importantly, in the United States and across the globe, over 2,000 plus stormwater utilities are being created. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of a stormwater utility. All right, well this might be a change when in the next few months, because the city and county of Honolulu is also exploring to put in a stormwater utility. And so what this means is that the customers will get charged based off of the amount of impervious surfaces. That's your roofs, that's your parking, that's your driveways, and basically what is your stormwater runoff contribution. But importantly, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It also then incentivizes practices such as green infrastructure, really to help restore the ecological systems and build back the natural hydrology. But importantly, though, a lot of the folks out there just don't have access to tools that help identify where and how much stormwater is being generated on their property. And utilities also don't lack the tools to be able to monitor and track stormwater runoff. So our solution is the Follow the Drop mobile application. It serves both as an educational outreach tool as well as provides data as a service to the utilities. As an educational outreach tool, the app is used to identify where and how much stormwater is being generated on your property, and importantly, will provide you the ideal size rain catchment tank or rain garden, and then show you your volumetric stormwater runoff that whatever size system you put in. The data is then saved and goes into our database, and then we were able to provide data management back to the utilities, which then enables them to be able to give their rebates or potential fee reductions for each property. So all of these systems combined, that turned out weird, basically triple the benefits for both the community and the utility. To date, we were really lucky. We were able to raise money from the state of Hawaii and the Hawaii Community Foundation to develop the mobile application. We were actually able to pilot it in 5 schools with over 350 students to beta test the app. And we're currently engaging both with our agencies here in Hawaii and abroad. So currently we're working on doing a stormwater a pilot with the utility, and we're working to seek out nonprofits who also want to see this as a workforce development to get trained with the app and go into the community and learn how to install green infrastructure. And all this combined, we're really hoping that this will build a resilient Hawaii, a resilient Ala Wai, and really help build resiliency across the many cities around the globe. Thank you so much. If you're interested in learning more, you can, we have a table in the back, and otherwise you can sign up for early access by going to 3r-water.com. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. This shows that we all care about the state and the cities that we live in. My name is Aurelia Gonzalez, and I am here to present some research that I conducted last spring for a graduate course. Me and 3 other students wanted to know how green infrastructure is being employed here in Hawaii, who's doing green infrastructure projects here in Hawaii, and how we can promote projects here in the future. So as Lauren just explained, we have a stormwater issue. Stormwater causes pollution. It's a concentrated form of pollution. It carries sediment and also causes flooding. Currently, we manage for these systems and have heavy compliance to treat our stormwater system, and we want to make sure that our pollution is not hitting the streams. So we have best management practices in order to filter out our stormwater, and some of these practices are considered low impact development, and green infrastructure is a type of low impact development. So what is green infrastructure exactly? They're man-made designs. They mimic natural systems, so they filter, store, retain, and treat storm water. You can also repurpose this water, so not only does it have environmental benefits, but it also has social and economic benefits for our communities. These are types of green infrastructure projects that you can see in our city right now. But there are currently lots of different designs and configurations of green infrastructure. So you have bioswales, you have rain barrels, permeable pavement, keep going, large underground retention basins, artificial wetlands, cisterns, and blue roofs. There's also ways to meander and re-navigate water to make it more manageable. Things like green space and just planting trees in our urban environment is also considered green infrastructure. So the questions that we had for our city and people working in green infrastructure currently were, what is the current state of green infrastructure? Who's implementing GI and where? What are the inefficiencies with green infrastructure? And are there any leverage points or possible funding opportunities to promote green infrastructure in the future? So we went to 20 professional groups in the state, private, nonprofit sector working with green infrastructure, and we transcribed our interview questions, which you just saw in the previous slide, to develop our findings, which you can find on Scholarspace. It's a pretty extensive document. But today I'll be talking about the common gaps that we found with green infrastructure and then potential funding opportunities. So these were the types of comments that we found while interviewing. Comments like, the project sat because we didn't understand it. And volunteers want to go out and work in the ocean. They don't want to sit on the side of a parking lot to help maintain these things. And we need to show how green infrastructure would save us money in the future. So these were types of comments that we used to categorize some of these problems with green infrastructure. So these were our 6 major gaps that we found in this study. One was understanding entities' roles, having motivations and incentives for these programs, just like Lauren mentioned, the capacity and process, and then changing paradigms, education, and awareness of what the stormwater issue is and what green infrastructure can do. Also, transparency and maintenance of these projects, who's going to maintain them, how they're going to be maintained, and also having a leading force in our community that can show us the way and guide us what these projects, how they're built and what they can do. So from this project, we developed a systems map. These are currently working groups that deal with green infrastructure here in our city, how they're connected to one another. You can even navigate this map and find a particular working group and see who they're funded by, who they're working with, other departments that they collaborate with. But in this map, you can also find potential funding. There's groups out there like the Oahu MPO that has funding opportunities for people for green infrastructure. There's also consent decrees and lawsuit settlements that have happened here in our city that provide opportunities. There's the EPA's State Revolving Fund, and then also entitlement as the community-based redevelopment group. You can skip over. There's also some pressure points, like asking for green infrastructure in complete streets projects.
and asking for GI-specific language in our 50 to 100-year management plans and the Sustainables Community Plan and the Board of Watershed Management Plan. And then also paying attention to how we're going to flood, or how we're going to rezone some flooding and make some new flooding codes for our city. So some major takeaways were that we need to streamline green infrastructure planning and techniques to help us develop these ideas. Having more cost and benefits analysis, research in general for these projects would be greatly beneficial. Having exposure, education, and discovering incentive programs, but also engaging in current urban planning. I included this last slide because the city and county is currently talking about the stormwater utility fee that Lauren mentioned. And if you guys want to engage in the city and how this utility fee can be managed and planned, please do so. This is the schedule for the next year or 2 years out. And if you have any questions, I am located in the back table, and you can find me or email me with this email down here below. Thank you.
The subject I'm covering is underground detention storage and repurposing of water versus the upstream detention basins. Okay, so this is an example of a detention basin that the Army Corps is proposing in Makiki. There is a chance that they may remove it, but the structural portion is actually about over 300 feet long, bigger than a football field. The whole basin is several hundred feet long. Above the basin, they would be excavating the soil, ripping it out so that they could have storage. And that creates a whole other series of problems. And anyway, each detention basin, as I have here, bullet point, several hundred feet of stream are destroyed. It destroys acres of natural forest, scars the land with ecosystem impacts. Okay, this is a frontal view of the Makiki detention basin. I guess a profile view showing the height and how the structure is designed. There's a pipe or conduit that runs through it that's designed to let the stream flow in non-emergency times. These detention basins can plug if they're not properly maintained. And we know that the city and county has a problem with maintenance. And even a smaller storm can plug the conduit, and basically what's going to happen is it's going to fill up and be breached. And whenever a detention basin is breached, there's always a chance for failure. The other thing we know is that weather is unpredictable, and we can always have a storm that's significantly bigger than what the detention basin was designed for. And again, that becomes a safety issue, because what if we get 40 inches of rain and it was designed to handle 10 inches of rain? Well, then whenever we hold back water and something fails, it becomes very catastrophic versus just everything flooding. Okay, open detention basins, basically there's also safety concern. Pets, children, people might go into the water not knowing that water is actually flowing, draining underneath, and they can get sucked in and things can happen. Okay, now what we're proposing is rather than building detention basins in the stream, we go laterally off to the side of the stream. That way there's minimum impact on the mainland. In Taiwan, they basically have built cisterns to store water for repurposing, so it's multifunctional. It's not just in the 1 in 100-year chance that we'll use the system. It's something that we can use all the time and save our aquifer. For example, if we chose to do something at a district park, it would be off to the side. We would set back off the stream and not touch the stream. It wouldn't be visible. and we wouldn't have the safety concerns of it being an open pit. It can be designed to improve the park. Many of our parks are sloped or not designed really well, and in the course of doing the construction, they can level the park, improve the drainage, make it easier to maintain. There's no danger of overtopping because when they fill up, they get full, and the water just continues to continue on down to the Ala Wai Canal. Okay, we can also do underground detention storage on the residential area. I think the previous speaker went over some of these. But in the event we don't get enough people to build these, we can target the areas that we need storage, especially where there's a lot of rain, further up in the valleys. But everybody can do their little part. Like I said, rain barrels. University of Hawaii encompasses a big area, and they have open area where they could go underground. So I created a map, and on table 30, this map has just general ideas. I Googled it. It's not rocket science. These are systems that are being done all over the country. In fact, many new developments today in Hawaii incorporate a lot of these detention basin concepts. Okay, so quickly, although I'm going over detention, I think the Ala Wai golf course, if we need one, would be the place to focus on. The size, it dwarfs, all the other detention basins put together. We could actually capture the water higher upstream, and we could actually enclose the Ala Wai golf course with a higher levee system if we chose to go with the levee system. The other option is to go underground storage, which I think would be the way to go because we can have the golf course on the top of it. And I really think if we went with a floodgate and flood systems, which I think the next speaker is going to go over, I think that can eliminate all the detention basins, and I think our valley issues can be solved through softer measures. Thank you very much.
My name is Mike Elhoff with Hawaii Engineering Services. I'm a marine engineer who spent my entire career on fluid dynamics and pumping systems and water and wastewater treatment. So we do a lot of work with the city, counties, the military, and the Pacific Islands in wastewater pumping and treatment. But I've lived here 35 years, and the Ala Wai has been a pet peeve of mine. I also lived in Palolo at 600 feet elevation with the pigs, and so I wanted to do a presentation just to talk about this pump thing because it's been looked at, and so basically I came up with a 5-point solution, which the first one is to increase the watershed absorption by minimizing erosion from invasive species. So that, I'm talking about pumps, but you can't ignore that. And then as well as Lauren pointed out, the urban absorption. So I'll get to this, come back to this, but number 2 is integrated retention basins, trying to do it places that make sense, like a golf course. And number 3 is dredge the canal to its original 15 to 20 foot depth and reinforce the walls where needed with access steps. Number 4 is install fresh seawater source pump at Kapahulu groin here and micro tunnel to the canal at the Kapahulu end. And number 5 is to install stormwater pumps and floodgates at the Ala Moana Bridge. So this picture kind of summarizes what I would suggest. First of all, we got to try to shave the peak flows off. We don't want to pump if we don't have to pump. And that would be through retention basins absorption and everything Dave just talked about and a bunch of other people talked about. The number 2 is that the Ala Wai was designed to have 2 entrances, or 2 exits, 2 entrances. And they decided that they didn't want dirty water on Waikiki Beach, so they truncated it. Until and unless you bring fresh seawater to the head of the Ala Wai, it will remain a stagnant body of water subjected to fresh water and silt. The main focus for Army Corps is to get this water out of here, not flood that whole area. So that's the storm pumps located next to the Ala Wai Bridge with gates, and that would be tucked in behind the bridge. And then right next to it is an empty lot owned by the state, and that empty lot used to be the old boatyard, and that's where I would propose the electrical supply and generators. Okay, next slide. This was a report by DLNR in 2015. Next slide. And this summarizes everything about the first pumping, that's to bring fresh seawater or fresh water into the Ala Wai at the Kapahulu end. So they've already proposed this. I'm not sure why it hasn't moved forward, but I urge that solution because it's the only way to get really oxygenated fresh seawater on a continuous basis. This is where I would put the pump. I would put a submersible pump right there. I originally was looking at the natatorium, but it's a little farther, and this is a much simpler and closer location. And then you micro-tunnel under Kapahulu Boulevard and bring it up to the head of the Ala Wai. That's the location, and that's what the submersible pump would look like. The tourists, nobody would ever see it. The pump is silent. It's submerged underwater, and you have to supply electricity to it. This is the ACE flood model, and just kind of give you an idea of that we need to get that blue stuff out of the Ala Wai and into the ocean. Next slide. And that's right now, pumping was suggested with gates, but right now the model shows 10,000 cubic feet per second of water flow coming down from the mountains. So with all those solutions of absorption, invasive species, and detention basins, if you can get that number down to 2,500 cubic feet per second, you can look at realistically putting pumps at the Ala Wai Bridge. That would allow canoe access. It would basically, the goal would be to eliminate these 5-foot walls going up, 4-foot walls going up, and let the pumps pump the 4 feet down. Next slide. This is what happens when you pump, and right here you have the rain. The amount of water coming into the Ala Wai Canal is the red, and the black is the pump. The pump turns on hours before the storm starts, pulls down the Ala Wai, and anticipates that peak and shaves it down. If we can shave that down through absorption and detention basins, we're achieving our objective. Next slide. This is what the floodgate looks like. It has an integral gate. It normally sits up out of the canal, so canoes can come in and out all day long. And when you have a flood event, it drops down and the pumps turn on. Next slide. This is what a pump looks like. It's a submersible sitting sideways, and it's integrated into the gate. This is, again, another example out of the canal, in the canal. And this is 10 pumps, which would take 2,500 CFS. It would be 87 feet wide out of the 150-foot canal width. And it would have a hoist building right next to the Ala Wai Bridge. That's what each one of the pumps looks like. It has a flap gate, and that would then discharge into the Ala Wai Harbor. And that's an example of one of these in the Netherlands. And you have a screen to keep things out of the pump. That's it.
In 2021, the Ala Wai Canal turns 100. So that's 2 years from now. The idea of Ala Wai Centennial is that we need a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift with regards to how we adapt to climate change cannot be one where we militarize the climate. You'll hear people saying that we need to fight climate. We need to fight climate change. What we need to do is we need to celebrate climate change, we need to obey the climate, and we need to use climate change as our opportunity to recover our ahupua'a for the next 100 years. Whereas the current paradigm is to stop flooding and keep the water out, The new paradigm is that we need to adapt to climate change in a way that's going to protect our freshwater resources and keep them clean so that we can feed ourselves. It's a very difficult task because it's very developed here. But if you put all of the alternatives that we have talked about today together, you can sort of organize it into a system of 5 overarching issues. One is the Ahupa as academy, productive forests and reef, retrofitting our currently channelized streams, the conversion of the Ala Wai golf course into the Waikiki Kalo field, and the installation of Kalia Dam, or a pump and lock system. If you go to www.alawaicentennial.org, you can see maps and diagrams. I'll go through some of them. This is a map of all the schools. The Ala Wai Canal is home to a watershed that has every single major educational institution in the state located here in this watershed. Every school within 0.25 miles or a 5-mile walk to the stream. This is a map looking at a connected system from mountain to ocean. We can consider that the kipuka of the urban environment. We have an idea of retrofitting our streams so that the water entering the canal is clean and reduced of sedimentation. We have a map here showing prioritized properties for potential storm green infrastructure based on property locations to inlets into the stormwater drain system, shown in red. So every house, every street is connected to the stream via an underground stormwater network. Zooming into the area, coastal area around the Ala Wai Canal, the idea of Kalia Dam. So we just heard a presentation about a pump and lock pump system. This is looking at a pump and lock system. Some might worry about the scale, but it's already scaled to the buildings. You can see the canoe going through. That's the Hokulea. And along with the idea of installing these infrastructure components are all these soft infrastructure components like the programs. What if the Ala Wai Canal was so clean, we could have the Ala Wai Fishermen's Association. In combination with the Canoe Club, you can have community advocacy to make sure that the Ala Wai Canal stays clean so we can fish from it. This is a map, let's say in 100 years, by the end of the centennial, look at Ala Wai Golf Course. That is Honolulu's largest open space. What does that say about our economy if our largest open space in Honolulu is a golf course? How would that change our economy over the next 100 years? If we turn that into something that we could use to feed ourselves, and then tourists can pay $25 to go have their adventure and eat kalo and feed Waikiki, and keep all the kalo that's growing on the windward side for locals. This is a map showing the connectivity from mountain to ocean. Really, the bigger picture of Ala Wai Centennial is that our chance for the next 100 years our chance of survival depends on our ability to adapt to climate change in a way that's going to feed ourselves. And this Ala Wai Flood Management Project is not just about Waikiki. It's about all of Oahu and all of Hawaii. This is a traditional map of the Ala Wai Canal, and I'm running out of time. So in terms of the bigger picture, ultimately what we have here is a social justice issue. This is a picture of Waikiki before it was filled in, before the Waikiki Reclamation Project, and shown here in red, if you can see it, are the fish ponds where Fort DeRussy was eventually constructed. Because in 1909, the Army Corps of Engineers was the first entity to fill in Waikiki. 12 years later, the Ala Wai Canal was built. This is the wetland today, the Ala Wai Canal. The red is Fort DeRussy. The value of Fort DeRussy is $4 billion, and it is the largest parcel in Waikiki. The next most valuable parcel is Royal Hawaiian, and guess how much that is? $650 million. That's how valuable Fort DeRussy is. I think it's time for reparations. Reparations for the militarization of this Aina. I'm out of time, so please visit Ala Wai Centennial for more information. There are a ton of resources in terms of GIS maps. The last one I wanted to end on is this map. We keep talking about flooding, this map right here. If you look at the census data, the real thing that we need to also talk about are all the people that are going to be affected by flooding. Everything shown in red are areas of poverty. And so we can't forget that this is not just about finance, this is about people. Mahalo.
Thank you, Sean. As you can see, there's many brilliant people in this room. Count yourselves among them, but especially people like Sean that have put so much time and thought and energy into some really innovative ideas. So as you've stayed this long, all of this is going to be online. All the presentations will be online at Protect Our Ala Wai Watershed. So just Google that, give us a day to get it uploaded. I don't know, we'll see how fast we can do it. Maybe it'll come later tonight. As of our final speaker tonight will be Sydney Lynch, who's the president of the Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds. Thank you, Sydney.
Good evening, everybody. Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds was formed because we feel that our voices are not being heard by the Army Corps in regard to the current flood mitigation plan. In 2011, the Army Corps moved forward with a very traditional dam and levee solution for the Ala Wai Watershed, methods that are today being called into question on the mainland and in many places disassembled. We feel that the natural beauty of Hawaii requires more holistic, forward-looking methods of flood mitigation that incorporate eco-friendly solutions as well as adopting much less invasive traditional methods of flood abatement, methods that work with nature rather than against nature. Several weeks ago, the City Council Permitted Interaction Group, informally called a PIG, made up of council members Fukunaga, Kobayashi, and Waters, hired Oceanit, a local engineering firm, to meet with the public and get feedback about the Ala Wai Watershed project. It is hoped that Oceanit will be tasked to continue to the next level, which would be engineering evaluation of alternative flood mitigation methods independent of any Army Corps review. Today's forum was a very quick and limited overview of what is available in the world today, and we hope that the Army Corps, if it is sincere in its recent statement that it can reconsider and change the elements of its plan, will provide the letter of authorization to the City Council PIG from the Army Corps head office in Washington that it is indeed empowered to make these changes. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening, to thank Olelo for filming this forum, and a special thanks to all of you who committed in an extremely short period of time to coming tonight to make this forum a reality. Thank you.
So, the booths are going to be open back here again. We would like to thank you for coming tonight, for sharing your voices and concerns and learning more about possibilities. We hope this evening's been really positive and engaging for you as it has for us. Remember, it will be rebroadcast on Olelo, and we will put the information and broadcast information as well as all the presenter slides on Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds website. Stay engaged, stay informed, be involved with your community, and help keep our island home special. Thank you for coming, and we hope that would you please give a big round of applause to all of our presenters again tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully if you haven't signed up, sign up over here so we can capture your information and send out updates. Thank you, everyone. Aloha.